Hello, good evening, everybody. All the participants who have logged in to look at our second, to follow us on our second Enterprise Wednesday events, where we bring in entrepreneurs who have been there, done that, and who are experienced entrepreneurs to share their insights. Enterprise Wednesday will happen every second and fourth Wednesday of every month. It is basically to help aspiring entrepreneurs, nascent entrepreneurs amongst the students of APU to hear from experienced entrepreneurs, their insights, their journey, their challenges, their scar tissues of how they made it, so that you can take inspiration from them. Okay, before we begin, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Vinesh, who's the Deputy Vice Chancellor of the Asia Pacific University, and also the Chief Innovation Officer of the APU Education Group, to give his opening remarks. Prof?
Yeah, thank you, Dash. We're on another Wednesday, another exciting Wednesday. In fact, it's rained so much today, and I think just for the session, the rain has stopped. Well, at least in my place.
Same.
I want to welcome everyone who are online, and you're not going to lose out. Definitely another exciting session of Enterprise Wednesday. I want to show appreciation to, firstly, Dash for emceeing this event week in, week out. And of course, to our wonderful and exciting to know our guests here, Mr. Yeoh Chen Chao, a very strong and in-depth profile that you have, and it's exciting to have you on board with us on Enterprise Wednesday. I'm sure the students and all my fellow colleagues at APU are going to enjoy this fire chat session. You bring in that such a wide experience, having been with many prominent companies, the likes of Microsoft, IBM, and Accenture, and now you've taken that knowledge, which was a stepping stone, into the startup world, and you've been very successful. I'm very happy to see a fellow Malaysian being so successful in your startup and all your entrepreneurial journeys to date and in the future as well. So I push it back to Dash for another fiery fire chat, so that we can enjoy the next 1 hour. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the session.
Thank you so much, Prof. That was really nice opening. So to everyone, Mr. Chen Chao, or Mr. Yeoh Chen Chao as he is known, is a co-founder of FAVE, FAVE, the FinTech loyalty platform in Southeast Asia. FAVE helps digitize tens of thousands of local businesses, from restaurants, cafes, retailers, spas, beauty and wellness studios, service providers, tourist attraction to hotels. FAVE actually also acquired a few of the Groupon subsidiaries in Southeast Asia, in Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia. What's its name? And FAVE was also recently acquired by Pinelapse in April 2021. Mr. Chen Chao is also the co-founder of KFit, which is the regional fitness sharing platform in Southeast Asia. Chen Chao was the regional operations director of Groupon Asia Pacific. He was the product manager for Jobstreet.com and management consultant at Accenture, like what Prof. Vinesh said earlier. He's an Eisenhower Fellow and an alumnus of Cornell University. He's an angel investor. For those of you who are listening and thinking about starting your venture, who has invested in numerous early-stage startups in the region. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mr. Yeoh Chen Chao. Chen Chao, can we call you Chen Chao henceforth, just like that? Or CC, maybe CC, yeah?
Yeah.
A very good evening to you. Thank you very much for spending an hour and a half for the students of Asia Pacific universities, as well as other people who are viewing this. And a warm welcome. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dash, for having me, and thanks a lot, APU, and also Professor Vinesh for the introduction as well, and warm welcome. Yeah, so I'm really honored to be here. Yeah, I think great that APU you all have Dash, the very seasoned entrepreneurs and been through all parts of that, and then I think really honored to get a chance to be here today with you all. Yeah, looking forward to the sessions.
Thank you so much, Sissy. So tell us, I mean, we want to keep this casual, keep it active, keep it in such a way that, it's not too formal. So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into the entrepreneurial journey, from all these experiences. Weren't you, what shall I say, tempted to stay back, work with the corporates? What was the itch that got you into this journey?
Yeah, to be honest, it was pure luck, right? So for me, maybe I didn't. It was not a plan. Actually, I knew nothing about it. I think one fun fact back in when I was a student day back in 2003, right? And so my professor actually offered me internship in Silicon Valley, and I decided to turn it down because I knew nothing about Silicon Valley. So I decided to go 3 weeks holiday in China. So that was a long, long time ago. But that was during my student days that I didn't make use of nothing, and I made use nothing of that at all. But one fun thing is that eventually when we started KFIT in 2015, one of our first investor was someone that I met in China during that same trip. So Yinglan,
Wow.
who was in Sequoia at that time, right? So never knew where the dot would connect. I mean, like, and maybe go back to that on how I got in. So maybe just a bit of brief. But so
Sure.
after I graduated, I from uni, I thought that I got a place at Stanford for masters. Again, close brush to Silicon Valley. Never got a chance. Couldn't get any funding, so I came back to Malaysia. That time I applied for internship. Accenture was the first one to reply me, so I started there. Worked there for 3 years in consulting. I think one fun fact when I was there was that a few of our teammates went on to join Anthony and Hui Ling to build what is Grab today. So quite a number of their key GMs were actually from that same team, right? So one thing is you never knew who your teammates were and where would they go to. And then subsequently in 2008, I went on to join JobStreet. And again, it was quite coincidental. I went for an event. The co-founder of JobStreet sat next to me. And basically that was how I knew about JobStreet, and then that's how I joined. And then in 2011, when how I really got into startup as an employee was when Joel and Kylie just sold their group small to Groupon. So I sent an SMS to congratulate them, and basically Joel asked me out for supper. I thought that he's going to buy me a good supper. That turned out to be my job interview, which I went in t-shirt, shorts, and slippers. And he brought in Anisha, who is a HR back then and also currently, and that was how I got hired at that time and joined that journey. And was in Groupon for 4 years. Started in Malaysia, eventually went on regional roles. And in 2015, I would say life was good. I think get to fly all the time. So I was visiting 3-4 countries a week with various Groupon businesses, managing $1.6 billion business, 12 countries to 3,000 employees. And I think at that time, I got a couple of job offers, and I basically told Joe that hey, I got this couple of offers, and it's pretty exciting. And then basically a couple hours later, Joe just called me and said, why don't we start a company together? So that was how I got into entrepreneurship. I didn't plan it. I never thought it is until a few hours even before that. Even at that time, I didn't think of it. And it was just coincidental to get on.
Wow. There's so much in there to unpack, Chen Chao. You said you didn't know anything. It was sheer luck. That's very, very humble of you. And you said you got to do a place to do masters in Stanford. And because of funding, you came back. You didn't go anywhere near Silicon Valley at that time. Is it, or
Yeah.
not even a scholarship? You didn't want to apply for scholarships or something?
I applied a lot of scholarship, all rejected.
All reject. Oh my God! So it's a good thing. It's a blessing in disguise. So you we got you back, coming back to Malaysia and going to China for a holiday and meeting in Sequoia's. You're invested, you say?
Yeah, but at that time he was a student, just like me.
Oh my God! Okay.
A long, long time before, because it was a long time ago. He was still a student. He was a master's student. I was an undergrad student, and we met there.
So it shows that even when you were, traveling and going around, as well as all your forays into Accenture, and from there has been a kind of entrepreneurial flair. You have networked with the right people, as well as taken the opportunities. When Joel invited you, taken the opportunities at the right time, and made good use of it. What, right?
Yeah. I think in a way, I think grabbing it, and actually that time when Joe offered me, it was a role as a telesales agent. In a glorified name called inside sales manager. But
Mhm.
basically, back then was he just started Groupon and wanted people to call up restaurant retailers to sign up as merchants. So that was what I agreed to join. And I think I decided to serve my 2 month notice in Job Street. And
Job
when I
street.
finished that notice, I came back in. He was like, okay. When I agreed to join him, the company was 8 people. When I walked in, the company had 37 people. And at the time, he doesn't need that role anymore. So for 3 weeks, I was actually doing random things. And at the end of the third week, he was like, "You're not sure where to put you. Why don't you become CEO?" And actually, to be honest, I have never managed anyone at that time.
Fantastic. And Job Street, who is the co-founder of Job Street, who sat beside you? You work
Okay.
with.
So it was
Sorry.
Kayip. So he
Okay.
was the one that basically put money for Mark Cheng, who is the main founder, to run it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's another success story. Hope we can get Mark one day on Enterprise Wednesday, but I don't know where he is, in Singapore or something.
Yeah, Singapore.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about Fave. Tell us a little bit about Fave. What do you do? How did you transition from KFit to Fave, and how did that happen? Why take us through that?
Yeah, so I think maybe I'll go a bit on back then in Groupon. I think Groupon was a daily deal site, right? So then we left Groupon. We had a non-compete against a lot of things that Groupon did. So we started KFit Fitness. I know KFit and me doesn't work that well. Like Joe used to call me KFat anyway. So we started from that bit, and then I think basically 1 year after that, we got opportunity to start acquiring Groupon subsidiaries. And at the time, we also think that okay, 1 year is up, we can now launch into this field. So we soft launched Faith at the same time acquired Groupon subsidiaries. First in Indonesia, after that Malaysia, and then eventually Singapore. And then that whole process took us 3 quarters. And then eventually by the second quarter of 2017, we rebranded and transformed into Faith. Right. So I think that was sort of how it built on. And I think back then we knew that Groupon was good at bringing new customers, discounted customers, new discounted customers. But we knew that for businesses, they also want quality customers. And I think loyalty retention is always a challenge. So I think with what we did was that we still keep the deals business until today, but we basically add on Faith Pay, which was basically a customer paying full price and then get a cashback for next visit at the same place. And how do we build this model was also we actually went on trips to China, went on a couple of trips there, and basically meeting, I think we did 30, 40 meetings with different people from different all the giants in China, right? All the top players there, and learning what works, what doesn't work, because China was in the forefront. And I think learning that we came back here as a kid. So I think that was sort of where and how we built on. And I think fast forward to today, for Faith, we have built on multiple solutions way beyond that. So I think beyond the Faith deals, Faith pay, which is a loyalty retention. We also build up e-cards with stock value. Think of a Starbucks where you can stock values, and then from there we keep on building, and we just launched recently Faith Pay online in Singapore, and it will be coming very soon in Malaysia as well, where in the online website you can start using Faith Pay as well, and then we'll continue to build the value chain through. So I think in the end is think of it is that if you run a retail offline and soon online, you'll be able to leverage on a technology that basically encompasses end-to-end way.
And with this model, you are able to take a lot of smaller entrepreneurs, small ventures, small SMEs, micro SMEs online, accelerate the whole process of digitization, right?
Yeah. So I think of it is that how do we level the playing field, right? So think
Yeah.
with the restaurants, right? Back then, if you were one single outlet cafe or one single outlet retailer, you would like to accept credit card as a payment method. Today, no one in the market is charging you 1%, right? Credit card fee. Today, if you are Starbucks or McDonald's, yes, you will get 1%, maybe even 0.9%. But today, if you're a small retailer, you're going to end up paying 1.5, 2%. So we provide 1% flat rate for every payment method and for every business, irrespective of size. So I think that's one way to narrow the playing field. So I think basically a lot of things that we built is think of what the big players, conglomerates can do. How do we take it and then create the product where it's a plug-in where any business can turn on? And I think that was sort of how to basically flatten the curve and enable a small player to do what a large player can do.
That is really what is needed right now to get more people become bankable. Basically, all the marginal small businesses can get online and they can customer loyalty and all that. You are managing all that for small enterprises as well, right?
Yeah, so I think starting from small, medium, and then I think right now as we have 40,000 marketplaces, we are really gradually going up the value chain to serve the larger ones. It's like Singapore, we are serving Harvey Norman and all those players already.
Okay. No, it's really interesting because like Charles Darwin said, it is not the strongest of the species that survives or the most intelligent, but the one that is the most adaptive. And looks like you and Joel have become absolutely adaptive and moved from kayfabe to fave, identified a sweet spot in the market, and accelerated the growth. They say that when you are in Silicon Valley or a developed economy, all the entrepreneur has to do is to identify a problem and solve the problem. But when you are in a developing economy like Malaysia, Indonesia, and Southeast Asia, the entrepreneur not only has to identify and solve the problem, but also create conditions that enable you to solve the problem. That is, educate the small, medium people to jump on your platform. How much of that did you guys have to do?
Yeah, so I think that is a whole industry efforts, right? So I think across board, and I think we were lucky that the tailwind is there to drive across board. I think digitalizations, and like it or not, COVID actually plays a big part to help a lot more businesses to digitize, right? So I think today businesses are all thinking on they need to go online. I think that's without doubt. It's just how much and how to do it. And I think that's sort of where we all come in. And I think as we go through in this bit is that I think over the last few years we see that I think today people knew, but even from consumer standpoint, it's no longer the younger ones that's online. I think pretty much every age group are online. Talking about scanning QR, back then at the start, what is QR? I think the first QR is maybe 4 years ago. But today, everyone do it multiple times on MySejahtera. So I think everyone is an expert in scanning that, right? So I think that sort of building through, and I think that as we build on different technology, I think technology is not difficult. The technology can always build and get from elsewhere. I think the key part is how do you get adoption? And I think a lot of it is that the adoption within KL and then the adoption in the wider part of the country, right? Knowing that we still have a lot of different parts of the countries that need to be developed. And I think whether from consumer, merchants, and I think today, yes, in KL, we have pretty much everything online serving us. But today, if you go to a small kampong, there's still a lot more to be done. And I think that's where everyone's efforts go in there to do it. And how do you do it in a cost efficient way as well, right? Because when we can't really hire the people in a small kampong and build it that way. And because in a short while, that salesperson will be able to get all the places already. So I think we will need to sort of adopt different ways to build through. And I think with all the MCO lockdown, that makes it a lot more complicated as well. But I think that's sort of the adapting. And I think a lot of times Joe is a visionary person. I'm actually this boring number person, deal person that go through. And I think a lot of it is we're lucky that we have a lot of amazing people in the team to help building through, whether from product, technology, operations, staff, marketing, or not. And I think there are a lot of those parts that connect the dots.
Right. How difficult is it to scale in? I mean, after this, I'm going to zoom out to more general questions. But how difficult is it to scale in a Asian market? I mean, it's easier to scale in a developed country because it's all homogeneous markets. People can go. Languages are almost similar, but in Asia with 650 million people, with various cultures, various barriers to entry into governments, markets, policies. How do you scale?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of it is that I think human behavior, there are quite a lot of similarity, but also understanding the nuances that differ. Maybe I will just share a bit on K-Fit Days in 2015 when we
Yes,
launched eight
sure.
countries in 5 months, right? So that time we launched Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Korea, Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, across board, right? And all with local teams there. And I think that one of the things is, let's just take a simple thing like exercise, fitness, exercise. Everyone exercise and whatnot, but even that, the timing of exercise and where the exercise differ. So take like Australia, people will go exercise 6 p.m. at the suburb where they stay. But if you go to KL, maybe 7 or 8 p.m. in the in between home and working place. So places like Hatamas, Bangsa, Uptown, Monkera is where they go exercise, right? And these people may not actually be staying there. And then if you go to Singapore, people will actually exercise at 8 o'clock in Central Business District. And then if you look at Hong Kong, people actually exercise at 7 in the morning in Central Business District. Like KL, I think imagine that we're going to start getting people at 7 a.m. to exercise. I think the crowd will be, target market will be very small. So I think that every market has those nuances that is different, and then type of activities. And I think one thing back then in Curfew, we also learned like, okay, which market, and let's say take a market in Hong Kong. How do we go? That time Guava Pass was another player in the space, right? And we both target actually very different. So we find the classes that everything held in Cantonese. Whereas Guava Plus go for all the classes that is in English. And Guava Plus, how they expand as well is they expand where all the expat market. And their
Okay.
pass is priced at about 100 US dollar, whereas we are priced at about 100 ringgit or 100 Singapore dollar for local market. But theirs is one pass that can go anywhere in APAC. And both actually serve very different market. They go for a lot of the upper end, we go for the mass market end. So I think that's a lot of it is even within the same play is understanding which market. And I think within even, and I think regulatory, let's say in fintech, definitely it has a lot more complication. Every market differs. Let's take even like, if I were to give you a simplest product like called, let's say Grab Pay within Fave. Today we enable in the Fave app to pay using Grab Pay as a payment method. In Singapore, we don't need government approval, we can launch straight. And if in Singapore, the style is if you break the law, the government will look for you. But you are responsible to just make sure that you comply with the law. But no one, you don't need any approval process, you just go. Whereas in Malaysia, you actually need to submit for approval and go through the approval process. And then you actually get a letter and say you have been cleared and fully approved. Then you go launch. But you know that once you have that letter, you know that you are definitely safe. You don't breach anything. So both has the pros and cons in that play, right? And then Indonesia is basically the market. How they do is that for the smaller player, you can go with it. But once you gain in a size, the regulation becomes stricter to you. So I think a lot is knowing the nuances of different markets. And now as we are trying to now launching in India, is trying to, we're still trying to learn how does it work there? And likelihood India is not even a one size fit all. Every different market, every different city is different. Right? I'm still trying to learn the geography and maps of that.
That's interesting. There's identifying the market. I mean, our topic today is ideas to market. But tell us about India, about Pinelapse acquisition, and recent valuation of 3 billion now.
For Pinelapse, yeah.
Pinelapse, yeah. Okay. Tell us about that acquisition and what was the strategic reason that they have looked at Fave. And I read that it's your QR code way of buying, and India is also new into that.
Yeah. So I think that it was quite coincidental. So I think last year during COVID, our business was badly affected. So I think that was
Yes.
March, April, May. And I think at around the same time, Amrish, who is the CEO of Pinelapse, just joined Pinelapse at that time. And his wife was our Fave customers in Singapore. And one day he was
Sorry,
asking
sorry. He's what? His wife.
his wife. His wife is actually our
Okay,
customer.
okay, okay,
And
okay.
so he got to know about Fave through his wife. Right?
Okay.
So his wife,
Wow.
you go when you go out to eat and everything, his wife would be paying using Pay. And it's like, what app is that? And he took a look, and then that's when he go research further, and then that's how eventually connected to us. So I think never knew where your potential referral is. And actually that was not the first time. We actually have a few investors invested in us because their spouse are our customers. Right. So never knew where it is. And that was how that link, right? Because no matter what marketing we did, actually we didn't hit him. But actually his wife was him our customers. And I think that was sort of one way going through. And that back then, I think where Pinelapse has been around for 20 over years. They are basically the giant in payment terminal in India. So they have about 500,000 credit card terminals in India, which they have enhanced it, built it 2.0, digitized and everything. And I think they acquired Quicksilver for gift cards services 2-3 years ago. And I think basically for them, they are very strong in merchant space, but consumer side doesn't know about that. Right. And I think basically they were very strong in India. They were new in Southeast Asia. So I think where we are is that for Faith, we have been around in Southeast Asia. We are in a marketplace, consumer, two-sided platforms. So I think that where there's a lot of overlaps and not much cross cannibalization, actually close to no cannibalization. So I think that was where they invested in us last year, July. And this year, April, they fully acquire us. And I think that process, I think for us, it was also a learning journey. We have never been through being acquired, at least for my side, right? I think like how do we go through that process, due diligence, prepared through all the documents. And actually until today, Pinelapse senior leadership have never met Joe and myself. Their Malaysian leadership team has done it. Their group leadership team has not, right? And I think that that's where interesting. I mean, the whole thing is all done fully virtual. Thinking of them acquiring a company at a $45 million without seeing them. So I think that was an interesting bit, and I think we were lucky that a lot of trust that they put in with us, and we were super lucky as well. The timeline, they acquired us just before the COVID outbreak exploded in India. Right, I think everyone might likely have heard about COVID cases in India, and we were just super lucky because that in terms of timing wise, because if that has been the outbreak, a real likelihood will be affected because a lot of people actually got sick or even death in India, right? So I think that's where they affected concentrations and whatnot. And I think now as we think of launching India, I think the plan and platform orders are pretty much ready. I think right now is with COVID and people are talking about death. And I think Malaysia today we hit 6,000 cases. India we're talking about 400,000 cases, and that's official source number 400,000. I think if you ask people, they will likely tell you that the number likely is even higher. So people's mind is not in launching into an app or buying something or paying for something or downloading another app. So I think it will be interesting to see how we are. And I think right now we are planning, optimizing, and seeing what's the best way to enter the market in this environment.
Right. And I mean the Age article also says that you are going into buy now pay later. So basically taking some credit risk as well with consumers. Is that something that is accurate?
Yeah, so I think we are going to plan out and launching the buy now pay later market. So I think today we have niche players, whether Split, Atomy, Hula, and all those people launching it. They are basically built up from scratch for buy now pay later. And then I think we have players like Grab and like launching into it as well. So I think for us, basically play into two parts. So I think that Pinelapse has been in credit card business for all this while. We have all the terminals. We now have this app. So I think eventually is how do you take the synergy of these two and enabling consumers and merchants to have the flexibility of paying for installment. I think prior to this buy now pay later, or even until today, with some of the players and buy now pay later, because they are all dedicated players. So I think each player will have a couple hundred businesses be able to have buy now pay later. I think the key would be that how to overnight have thousands or tens of thousands of businesses offering buy now pay later. And how do we capture the long tail? How do we ensure that we minimize the fraud rate? How do you ensure that the mechanism is done in an easy way that everyone can understand and make use of? So I think there's still quite a bit of things, but I think the team has been working very hard to build through this and looking forward to it coming to fruition pretty soon.
Right. So I'm going to change gears a little bit, Chin Chow.
Yeah.
At APU is building what we call the enterprise at APU, a kind of an ecosystem to build the entrepreneurial DNA in the students as well as in the faculty. Because like the world is changing, the world is rapidly becoming uncertain. And in the world that is uncertain, we want to create graduates who are agile, and have an entrepreneurial mindset. Not necessarily they will go out and start companies, but become entrepreneurially minded. But we also expect a lot of them to have ideas and take the business forward, take the ideas forward and venture companies. So, so APU is building this entire enterprise at APU and building the capabilities of the students. So this is why these kind of events are brought together. Plus, we also have the Ideas Accelerator as well as an accelerator program. So what I would like to push forward now is most of the things that you've said looks like if you had written a business plan, it wouldn't have worked. So I want to start with that. That part of they call it the infatuation, where you do not plan, but you shape the venture as it goes along. Tell us a little bit about that process where there's a business plan doesn't work, right?
Yeah. So I think to be honest, we never have a working business plan. I think yes, from time to time we do have slides, but it's keep on updated as we go along. And I would say that and I think this time I was sharing that when we built Faith Pay, we went to China and talked to different people and understanding. So I think the key as you think of it is fall in love with a problem set that we try to solve, a target audience or problem that you try to solve. You're trying to focus on solving a transportation problem. You're going to focus on solve a problem for SME in terms of marketing. You're going to try to solve a problem for affordability for youth or whatnot, right? So think of a problem, and because that problem is big enough and exciting enough for you to build on. So I think that would be the key. Because as you start up journeys, I think a lot of time you look at newspaper, look at all this media, it looks glorified, it looks amazing.
Yeah.
You look at the press release, this company got this acquisition, this company got this fundraising. It's all the celebrations. Right? Occasionally you hear some business buzz. But I would say that the journey is tough, right? For every time you hear someone got raised an investment, the news didn't actually tell you that likelihood they got rejected tens of times, maybe more than 100
Thanks,
times.
Achan.
Yeah, I think they've been rejected hundreds of times, right? And I think that a lot of time is that resilience, the ability to take that rejection and then pick up the valuable points to adapt if it makes sense for you, and then go on and show and don't give up. I think Stripe, one of the global unicorns, the founder shared is like a lot of time it's not that you have failed. It's just that you have not yet succeeded. I think a lot of time is just keep on trying, tweaking. And I think as you focus on the problems, the idea don't fall in love with it. Because the idea will shift, transform. Right? So let's say think of it back then, right? Those that think of idea, the problem is communications among friends.
Chen Chao, just now when you came closer, we could hear you better, but when you move, there is a lot of echo. Okay, now you can. Go on.
Okay,
yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay. This is good, yes.
Okay, so I think that so talking about, let's say the problem of.
Yeah, you said don't fall in love with the idea, which is very good. I want to double click on that, but just go on with that.
Yeah. So I think fall in love. Don't fall in love with idea. Fall in love with the problem to solve. Right. So take example. The problem trying to solve is communications. Right. So I think of it connecting with people and whatnot. Think of the good old days, right? Maybe some of you may be not old enough to go through this, but I think if you ask someone who is a bit older, back then people started with ICQ. Then people went through Friendster, then Yahoo Messenger, MSN Messenger. But today, all those things are basically history. People no longer talk about those. And today, people talk about WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, but even
TikTok.
And people evolved to TikTok and Clubhouse and whatnot, right? And I think Clubhouse is coming to Malaysia in 2 days' time. So I think that people will be, for Android side, So I think it will keep on evolving, right, as we go through. So I think that the thing of it is that the problem you try to solve is there, but then you keep on add on and then what problem to solve. So I think that what idea, and if idea doesn't work, kill it. I think that we have killed so many ideas, and a lot of times after spending so much time working on it, doesn't work, kill it, and then build on. Because a lot of times the reluctance to give up on an idea makes us stuck with it, and then we couldn't move on. So I think is set a goal, set a plan, and then build on. But continue whichever idea, whichever way is building to that journey. And I think is
Right.
that iterations, that service, that products that continue going on. And I think that, and if you think of building a startup is a quick way for you to make money, it is not. If you think of a
It's
startup,
not.
it's a glamorous, good life, no. Maybe even a quote Mark Chang. Mark Chang was saying that back in 1995 or so, when he started the journey, he thought that when he started a company, you have a lot of free time to drink coffee. He got it in 2014, which is close to 20 years later. And he said that when he sold the company for 1.9 billion ringgit, people told him overnight success. But he said that that overnight success took almost 20 years.
That's right. That's right. It's very interesting. Okay, going back to the problem worth solving and problems that you want to solve. How does this is for the benefit of the students or thinking of becoming entrepreneurs. A lot of people say passion. I'm not a big fan of this passion story. How does someone find a problem that they will gravitate towards to solve? How do they find it?
Yeah. So there is no perfect part of it, but I think that one of the things is that once you think of a problem, or even ways to solve a problem and start thinking about it, talk to many people. So maybe a 2 test, I'm going to giving you a couple of tests on this. And it's a rough test, it's not a perfect test. One is that if you start finding that you are talking to non-stop 20 people, 50 people, 100 people, every time you see someone, you talk about that same problem, same idea, and you keep on thinking a different way, keep on reading about it, even tired or whatever, you still keep on doing it consistently, not for like 1 day, 2 days, only for a quite long period, then you think that you have found something that you really, really care about. And you're willing to let go of many things to build this. Right? So I think to solve that problem. So I think that's one. And I think the second is that when you found a problem that you really even can't even fall asleep, right? At night, you keep on thinking about it. When you're driving, you think about it. When you're working, studying, you're thinking about it. Yeah, then you know that you have it. Something that really consumes you. I think that will be something. And of course, during that period is how to make sure that this is something that's lasting. And I think a lot of time when you build an idea or a problem to solve, especially ideas, if an idea that everyone thinks is okay, then likelihood is not okay. Idea that people say ridiculous or crazy, or people is like, wow, so you know the kind of people that people lovers and haters, then you think you have something. And I think a lot of time when you build something is build something that a smaller group of people love it, then a larger group of people okay with it. Right? Because think of it like Apple. Apple iPhone is only sold to a few percent of populations, but they made all the profits. Right? In the end, it's not about even AirPod, right? The iPhone, the Apple's what is actually bigger than a lot of large company. I think if I don't remember wrongly, the revenue is in tens of billions US dollar.
Yeah. No, this is interesting because like as entrepreneurs, we don't sit around and do business plans, and then we talk to people immediately as soon as we identify a problem to see whether a problem is real or not. And the other interesting thing you said is that kill the idea if it is not good enough. And there's someone asking a question here: how do you know which idea is good enough to be executed? Sheng Yang, but. So killing an idea and then choosing an idea that is good enough to be executed. You want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so I would say that anything that you think that that's worth try is set a small period of time, budget, and then go for it, right? Try it. And then I think if let's say you have multiple ideas, then basically do a quick weightage and see, okay, which one you can do, right? Because a lot of time you can't do too many. But let's say think of it in a smaller resources, there's only one thing. So let's say you can only do one thing, one bit. How do you do it? And how do you quickly test out? How do you be able to launch? So back then, let's say take KFIT. How do you know which country to launch? We basically
Exactly.
create a simple survey, put some Facebook ads, Google ads across into multiple cities in across Asia, and a small segment we ask them how frequent do you exercise, do you have a contract with your gym and whatnot. So a few questions just to ask, 3-4 survey questions, and then at the end of the survey question ask them by the email and phone number and where they're located at, which city, and basically from there we sort of test through. So that will give us one set of input, how much costs to get one, and how is the which city has more virality, and the second is pair to where we can find someone to put on. Right, so I think that's how the cross countries kind of business. But even within a single country, is back then. Still remember KFIT? Fifth Week. We were like, okay, we're going to put $100,000 to launch, and our goal is to get $100,000 sales by third month. If we don't, then we will kill it. So I think it's how do we set it framework and then go with it. And I think a lot of time is the forget that all the formality structures and whatnot. Is I think is how do you hustling it and going through one customer at a time, one merchant at a time, one bid at a time, and go through and see and really observe why people use it, why people don't use it, and whatnot, right? And let's say, and a lot of time every new product is going through that. And sometimes the product may not work for a while until the segment. So let's say we launch gift cards. Gift card doesn't work for us at the start, first few months. And when COVID hit, people want to support the restaurants, retailers, gift card works. And then from there, people spiking up the usage. And then now people post-COVID, people are still, not say post-COVID, but post-lockdown, that time people continue using it and really continue to build on, right? So I think a lot of it is also timing and knowing the right bit. And a lot of time is trial, tweak to know what can work and what can't work. And on what to kill, a lot of time is that insanity is doing the same thing, expecting a different outcome, right? So I think it's like, think of it, what can you come to try? And I think everyone has different resources as well. Whether you have a lot more resources to try, but I think even then time and money is limited, right? Where do you put in? How much is it? And how do you do a simple test to find out what has worked and how do you scale? And I think as you try out what works, key is that if you find something work, how do you scale that up? Right? Because a lot of times we keep on trying new things, but we never scale up what works. So I think that maybe is something to think about.
So Anusha has asked, how do you build a successful customer base? Before you answer that, Chen Chao, there has been a study about expert entrepreneurs, which we call the theory of infatuation, which actually has studied how entrepreneurs think. And in that, they say that entrepreneurs start with their means, who they know, what they know, and who they are, and then start with what they can afford to lose. And from there, they test out trial and error, make quick, and then turn a completely unexpected situation to their advantage. Like you said, COVID was a time where gift card was able to do. So this is something that we are seeing in these kind of questions, which is a topic that APU is going to incorporate in their syllabus, right? So this trial and error, and how do you know this trial and error? How much money are you going to spend on this trial and error? Like you say, 100,000. Is that something you're able to lose? And after that, we'll take the question from Anusha.
Yeah, and actually 100,000 may not be the amount, right? I think back then when we were doing $100,000, that time our company has about 200 employees, right? So for us at the time we need something that is scalable. So basically for us, is anything couldn't get $100,000 traction by third month, it's not worth trying. But I guess if you're a 2-person team, you can afford maybe to get something that is worth up to $5,000, $10,000.
Yes.
Right. So I think in the end, a rough ratio doesn't mean it has to be so. Is that for every dollar that I spend? So let's say if I spend 10,000, my goal is that within the third month, this 10,000 will turn into recurring 10,000 every month. And of course, it depends on your profit margin or for that business or whatnot. It may differ. This ratio is not a golden ratio, but it's sort of roughly thinking, right? So I think is how much of it you can cumulative invest over, let's say 3 months, equivalent to by that time, there's a value for per month, right? So if you put 5,000, you should aim for at least 5,000 revenue by every month by the third month. Right. And I think for one thing as we have a team to think about is that a lot of time we have a lot of ideas. So one of the key things is also if you want to build more ideas, then we need to kill ideas, or else we cannot launch new ideas because we have limited and time and resources and everyday attention. So I think there's something. Maybe I'll go to Anusha's questions on how do you build
Yes,
a
yeah,
customer.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think the customer base, I think a lot is understanding them. And I think that is observing through data, observing and through various anecdotes, focus groups. I would say survey is not that helpful. You can help you to get a bit of insights, but a lot of it customer doesn't know what they really want. So I think it's observing, trial, and for larger things, you actually try A/B testing. So example now, if you are actually seeing the Faith app, different people actually getting different version of the Faith app because we are testing to see which version will work and where at what point we want to scale up through. Of course, what makes it tougher for the testing is that now with COVID, it's harder to test whether which way will continue working. But I think it's going through that, and I think as we build the customer base thing of it is that at different layers. So I think the most layer is whether people are aware of it, right? And then once the people are aware of, okay, this brand exists or this type of product services exists or this app exists, is that, okay, what did the thing do, right? And then the next layer they will find out is this is something that I find it resonate, I find it useful, do I find it needed at this point? And then if those things check those boxes, then only people are like, okay, maybe let me try it out. And after people try it out, the question is, would they go on it second time, third time? Right? I think if you look at your phone today, many of the apps that you've downloaded, a lot of times they've never opened again. And then you think that maybe this app is like something that you thought at the time is very super excited and then you drop it off, right? Most apps actually never been opened again. And even websites, right? A lot of websites we don't go back of it. So I think a lot of it is knowing that layer. And then after that, when people come back second time, third time, then it's how do you build on more revenue, earning more deeper, and then eventually getting them to recommend. And I think one thing that in Grab in their IPO document and actually for Faith as well, we have seen is that the longer a customer stay with us, the more they transact. So, so think of it is that our customer that would join a customer on Faith in 2017, let's say they bought 6 times in a year. 2018 they will buy 10 times. 2019 they actually buy 15 times. 2020 they actually buy 20 times. So we're actually seeing that curve continue to go up. And then each cohort subsequently they will buy more in that sense. So I think the key is measuring each cohort and then that build through. And I think if you look at the IPO document, it shows the same thing. So we actually went on and studied that after seeing the Grab IPO deck. And I think one thing as you look through is that go and study, because there's so many listed companies and world-class companies. So from time to time will always be scanning through the quarterly reports, annual reports, actually IPO prospectus, and not for me to buy their shares, but to really learn, right? And because they share so much, if you want to learn about Shopee or C, then they can go to read about C prospectus or Airbnb prospectus back then, and the quarterly earning results. And actually the earning transcript, basically the founder or the CEO will actually be going on, and CFO will go on being interviewed by all the analysts, and all the questions they answers. Those give us a lot of insight. So let's say example during COVID, how do we know the global trend? Then I go to study Visa, MasterCard, Amex, Square, their quarterly reports, right? And that gives us a lot of insights how things are at different parts of the world. And that connect the dot for us.
Beautiful, beautiful. There's a question here. How do you keep up with competition? Also, how do you deal with the pandemic?
Yeah, Cynthia, good question. Yeah, so I think in terms of keep up competition is that,
Cynthia.
yeah, so I think that for competition, I think different, one thing is knowing what you are good at and knowing what you can't compete, right? So I think for us, for Faith, we are a smaller company. And I think especially prior to Pinelapse Acquisition, but even now we are think of it as like a smaller and nimble company, right? So I think that a lot of times, let's say think of the payment space, in the consumer space, who are the players that people associate with? Shopee Pay, Grab Pay, Boost, Touch and Go. Let's think about what's the size of each of them. Shopee Pay is owned by Shopee or C, and they are worth 140 billion US dollar. Grab Pay is owned by Grab, and Grab is worth 40 billion US dollar, right? Boost is owned by Axiata. Axiata is maybe 30, 40 billion ringgit, right? And Touch and Go is owned by Alipay and Financial and CIMB. CIMB was tens of billion ringgit, and Financial is owned hundreds of billion US dollar. Right? They are all in tens of billion and above, right? US dollar and above, and we are nothing. Right? Eventually, we were still at 45 million US dollar versus that size. But I think how do we play in that space? But today, if you're talking about that space, people put our name together with those players. And I think a lot of it is how do we play through that? And I think that's always, so I think playing the game of the big players and be able to play the things that they couldn't do. And also one thing is not just look at them as competitors, but work closely with them. We actually have partnership with almost all of them, right? If not all of them. And I think it's looking at how we can synergize, because competing head on as a smaller player, we will lose. We will not have the resources. We will not have the brand. We don't have a connection. We don't have everything that we could. But what we can is speed. And I think the other thing is speed is key. So, example, back then, there was once we were doing a partnership with Alipay. And then after the partnership is signed, we asked Alipay, at that time we were a few months old in 2017. And we asked Alipay, why do you work with us? And the answer given to that by them to us was because you guys was fast. We did the whole thing from the first call till the agreement signed, press release issued globally, integration plan done, operation plan done, 6 working days. And for 6 working days, typically is for them to get an appointment with the big players. But because for us being a small player, that means everything. So I think a lot of time is that there's the ability to put down and then just focus and run. I think as a smaller player, that's our strength. And I think that's where, as you build up, you need to be able to run faster than the big one. Actually, when we look at the big players, the scary one is not big and slow. The scary one is actually big and fast. And today, there are more and more big and fast players. And I think that's where they can pull through. And I think looking at the pandemic, I think a lot of it, on the second question on the Cynthia, is that, yeah, we knew, like, let's say last year, especially last year, March, when COVID hit, we knew nothing. Right, so I think at that time is that on the March 18, let's say Malaysia businesses tanked 90%, right? And I think a lot is learning through that and seeing what works, what doesn't work. And I still remember at one point in May when it first newly opened, I actually went to malls and even driving each place and count how many people in each shops and see where people start appearing, where people don't. So I think it's just keep on learning through talking in the chat group with all the restaurant owners. So I think that prior to pandemic, I was not close to many of the restaurant owners. I mean, knew some of them as merchants. But today, I'm in chat group with them, chatting with them until all this call. A lot of times when we knew of new government policies or incentives or whatever details, in sharing and going through. So I think that built the network and integration. So I think a lot of it is don't waste crisis. And I think a lot of it is that each crisis, the key is not what happened during crisis. The key is what happened after the crisis. Which platform, which players emerge stronger, which players equal, which player lose market share. And I think that's where key, and there's no right or wrong, but I think a lot of it is doing things that matter most, not the things that shocks and you sounds cool. And I think a lot of it is every time you do a partnership integrations, ask yourself what is success for you. Because a lot of times we just do partnership and then in the end it just shocks and So I think it's that knowing what, for some partnership maybe you knew results not going to be big, but what you want is a PR. And if that is the objective, fine, go ahead. But if that's not your objective, then maybe it's not. Right? We have seen so many partnerships that we do good in PR, but the value is actually not hold directly. But it opens up a lot of doors and eyes for us. So I think that's sort of some bit of it, but you need to know what you look for. So I would suggest that each time you do a partnership or even a campaign or a promotion, before you run those things, set for yourself what success means to you at what time. In a week, I need to get 50 transactions, 500 transactions, $10,000. I want to get 50 publications or whatever. Is choose one metric. One will be good enough. What it is that means success for you, and then track it, right? And because a lot of times if you don't set that, then after that when the results come up, you don't know whether that's successful or failure. So I think that's maybe one thing to think about.
So Oscar, that's a lot of insight in there, CC, about speed, about learning, not knowing, testing. But shall we take Oscar Kwan's question? Does passion-driven business fail most of the time?
Yeah, I think pure passion with no logic, with no depth, with no process, with no analytics, then tough, right? Passion can only bring you somewhere. But I think that if you have all the logics and everything, without passion, it won't bring you far either. I think passion is one of the key ingredients, but it's not the only ingredient there, right? Pure passion without everything, then it's basically a lot of senseless non-logical, right, that you go for. But I think passion does bring some bit because it keeps you going, it keeps the spirit going. But then you need to also check the reality of what works, what doesn't work, and then build it with science. I think that a lot of times is data. A lot of times is that we will not be able to have full suite of data. A lot of times with the insights, with the angle and whatnot passions, you generate hypothesis for you to try and to measure on certain things. So I think maybe that's how I look at it.
So, CC, you're talking about passion. A lot of the students always say, I don't know where to find my passion. I just don't know where to find. So I normally don't use the word passion. I say I move it to interest. What interests you the most? Because that's easier to deal with than passion, you know. Um, so there's a question here by Mira who says, would you have done anything differently in your career journey so far, given the opportunity?
Okay. Maybe let me just touch a bit on just a passion. Remember TEDx talk by Cheryl Yeoh, former
Yeah.
Magic founding CEO. So I think Cheryl back then, she was saying that I think a lot of times, right, it's not because of passion we are good, right? We are we are already good at something. That's why we are passionate about it. So I think she was
Yeah.
arguing the opposite reaction of that, right? And I think but there's just mentioned on the interest and whatnot. So I think a lot of time is that, and I think ikigai is another way to think about on it, like what you are good
Yeah.
at, what you want to contribute, what you want to learn about, what you can get rewarded for, and whatnot, right? So I think, and that's where the whole bit to think about. So you can Google about ikigai, IKIGI.
Ikigai. Yeah, that's very interesting, and that needs a lot of soul searching as well. That goes back to who you are and what your passion, what your superpower is, and all that kind of stuff. So you
Yeah,
want to take Mira's question?
yeah. So I
What would
think,
you have done differently? Yeah,
yeah, I
would
think
you have
that for
done?
me, yeah, taking the Mira's question, I think that I would say that I'm not someone that much reflective. A lot of times I'm going a step at a time. I think our career journey can go various permutations, and a lot of times is that we never know perfect. I think a lot of time is we will never be fully ready for opportunity. Maybe I'll take back the time when back then from going consulting. Right, I never planned to go consulting. I was just applying for a few things, and then I got into consulting with Accenture. Job street, I didn't plan for it as well. And then when I go Groupon, the same thing. So I think a lot of it along the journey, and even within Groupon, during the career growth there, we started in Malaysia. Eventually, we got a chance to do regional. It was not because we planned for it. Eventually, I think the opportunity came, and then Joel grabbed it, and I got to take along, right? And I think a lot of it is as we go on the journey is that I think that what I have done differently, I think for me is just optimizing and go for it. But I think when opportunity comes, and a lot of times hindsight 2020 looking back, right? I think that from time to time there'll be different opportunity knocking on your door, and some of them will sound super exciting. And but I think a lot of it is that each of that could be, I think in the end is what you looking at your circumstances at that time, what is the best option that for you to move forward through. And I think that a lot of time is keep in touch with people. Like maybe I put examples. This was close to 20 years ago when I was a student. There was this guy in my uni giving talks, and at the time no one talked to him. He was standing there, lonely guy. And I talked to him, but I didn't keep in touch with him. And that guy turned out to be Elon Musk, right?
Ah.
I wish I kept his name card. I wish I kept in touch with him. But I was chatting with him, and no one talked to him because at the time he was not popular. And the only thing I remember was he gave me a rocket ship
Where was
t-shirt
this? Where was this? Uh-huh.
in uni, Cornell. He came to
Oh,
give as a guest.
okay. 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 Uh-huh.
He just started SpaceX, and that time when I told the reason I remember him was because I mentioned I'm from Malaysia, and he got super excited because in his one of his first rockets sent out to the space, Malaysia was his first client. So he was talking
Wow.
passionately about him visiting Malaysia and then engaging with Malaysia to get through and Malaysia believing in him. Of course, at that time, I didn't know that this guy going to be famous, right?
Yeah. Now, what's his SpaceX worth? So Elon Musk, yes, fantastic. So there was another question before Azman Islam. Is it better to go with an idea that you can execute right now and get positive results, or stick with an idea that you can fulfill over time with a hope of delivering greater quality?
Yeah, so I think as one in this question, I think we say that think of it is whether both the ideas are in the same problem statement that you try to solve or not, right? So because if the same problem angle, then it's fine, right? Then you're just looking into okay, which part to do, and then how do you extend, right? And then whether you can build what thing for short term, what thing for mid term, long term, right? Of course, if it's in a completely different or very different, then it throws a different question mark to think about, right? So I think that a lot of time, maybe one thing that I'm going to put to everyone would be that think about think big. So the idea, the overall big picture things they think about is to think very big. Start small, fail fast, and scale faster. Whatever works, scale faster. So I can't emphasize enough because a lot of times the earlier part, the things we know how to do, but what works, we don't scale big fast enough. So I think maybe think big, start small, fail fast, scale faster. So I think that even for the idea that you talk about there, I think is that if within the same realm, then build on. If it's different, then you want to think about and see where you can go through. And I think it's a continuous journey, building through. And I think a lot of times it's quick tests. A lot of times is within few days, few weeks, few months, you get clearer on how do we treat. And a lot of times things will cross and merge. And I think a lot of times as you build in solving a problem, a lot of times looking at other industries, how to solve a problem. So example back then on Groupon deals, basically when people buy a voucher and couldn't go to the voucher, they had to contact a call center. And back then Groupon, we used to have a 20 people team responding to that, right? And I think back then we learned from Grab car or Uber back then, where when you call a car, you don't want to just press a button and cancel it. So we adopt the same thing. If you bought a voucher, haven't used it within a few days, you just press a button and cancel it. That cut down 80-90% of all the requests. And basically that saves us 20 headcount, right? And so a lot of times is you just need to sort of looking into because someone else in some other industry could have likelihood to have solved that problem. So what are the things that you can learn from it? And if it's not other industry, it could be other countries. And then you adopt and then you adapt, right? Yeah.
So we talked about failing fast, and I think that is something I would like to talk later, but there's a question by Simon Jr. that says many startups tend to fail at the beginning. How do you deal with failure? Okay.
Actually, I think it's not just going to fail in the beginning, we're going to fail all the time, right? I think we
fail all the time, correct.
All the time. And if you think about it, not just startups, right? So I'm not sure whether you all remember, like let's say Google, right? Google have launched Google Plus, Google Wave, and all those things. They failed.
WhatsApp glasses.
Yeah, glasses. If you think about Facebook, Facebook has a Facebook Stories. Who use Facebook Stories? You use Insta Stories, but you don't use Facebook Stories. And Facebook is staring in front of your phone at all times. And I don't remember hearing people using it. WhatsApp has a function called status. It's one of the key tabs there. Who use it? And you think of it, these are giants, right? Like global conglomerate. Facebook has always wanted to do marketplace transactions. And maybe they are still quite big on that, but if at Facebook scale, it's quite a failure if you think in that way, right? So a lot of time it's not even just a smaller one will fail, large one will fail as well. Because for them, let's say take for Facebook or Google or whatnot, anything that doesn't get a product that gets $1 billion, likelihood is fail because it doesn't going to move needle at all in their whole global grand scheme. So they need to solve at a bigger play. So I think at the startups it's a smaller bit, but I think of it is it's embrace failure, celebrate failure, and I learn from failure. Don't make the same mistakes twice, but don't be afraid to make mistakes. We will all make mistakes and we'll continuously make mistakes. We will constantly get humiliated for failures. I still remember there was once in a Sequoia conference. So Sequoia is our investor. So we are still the only Malaysian company ever invested by Sequoia. So Sequoia is the main investor for Airbnb, YouTube, LinkedIn, PayPal, Google, Apple, and all those things. So we went for their regional conference, and I still remember Joe and me at one of the conference at the night. We were like looking at ourselves and said, "Oh, if we really feel like failure, right? Because are we still fit to do it? Because we look at all those people, they were just so amazing. The Carousel founder, the Gojek, Tokopedia, and whatnot, Traveloka, they're all there. And they're all successful in that sense, right? So I think in the end is how do we benchmark against people who are better than us and continue to learn from them. Don't feel full intimidated by them, but I think it's open the door and learn. What have they done that worthwhile for you to pick up? Like a lot of things people have done and have gone through what works, what doesn't work. And I think it's just constantly building that, right? And I think people will be happy to share, whether in the same market, different markets, and whatnot. So I think it's constantly go through that. And I think it's how do we handle our emotion to handle failure. And I think put ego aside. A lot of times, failure hurt us because we are too egoistic. Our own ego is the one that going because we are scared of losing face. We're scared of that we're not good enough in the people's eyes. We're scared that other people see us as failure. We're scared that whatever, right? And I think that itself, our fear, our ego, all those things are the one that are going to hold us back. I think the key is just build through. And I think it's both continuous improvement, 1% improvement every day, as well as breakthrough. Each time you think about how do you do 3x, 10x, 20x, right? And breakthrough. And each idea you build needs to be bigger. So think of it like Grab, when they started taxi, right? And then when you do Grab car cannibalizes Grab taxi, but Grab car is much bigger. Then when they went on with food is bigger than car. And then now they're building pay and financial. The same thing for us, we build deal, then we build faith pay bigger. And then now as we're building different, finding the next few things that will get bigger than faith pay, right? And continuous scaling. So I think in the end, it's how do you build something that is 10x, 20x bigger as we go on each bit.
Beautiful. There's a question here. Adrian Chan, what are your success habits?
Yeah. So Adrian, I won't say I'm successful, nowhere near that, but I think that a lot of it, I think habit is that it doesn't have to be a same habit. I think in the end is that be ourselves and constantly seeing what we want to work on. I think we all have weakness, accept that. The key is which of our weakness we want to work upon and which weakness we are okay. And I think a lot of times as you build a journey is blend and partner, connect with, in complement people who are different from you, with different superpower. I'm not the most ambitious person. I'm not visionary. I don't see that. But I think Joe is super visionary, but he has kept in terms of like detail. He can go detail, but he doesn't stay on something long. So I think we sort of opposite with each other. And then we have in our team AP, who is a super salesperson, that we can go out there. And then we have people that who are very good at building processes. So I think a lot of times is bring products and whatnot. So I think technology. So I think a lot is connecting that dot. And then maybe at the start, you can't find all this group of people. But I think it's at each part is that when you build a startup, when you find a co-founder, don't find an equal of yourself. When you now initially start hiring a couple of people, you want to have the same philosophy and thinking, mindset, but different strength.
Very good. I have a lot of questions here, but this is for the students, so we want to people. What do you think about taking payments in terms of cryptocurrency?
Yeah, I'm a newbie in crypto. I started buying the crypto 1 week ago, so definitely have a lot to learn from y'all. But I would say that thing of it is that payment methods is agnostic. I think we are agnostic in terms of payment. So let's say for us, we take payment from credit card, debit cards. We take payment from online banking, from e-wallets. Like earlier, people were saying e-wallets competitor, but we take payment e-wallets. We take payment from Asia points at one point. We take payment from ATM. So would crypto be one of the things? Yeah, possible. In the end, I think crypto is, I think what Elon Musk, I know that Elon Musk a lot of time tweeting it and bringing the crypto price up and down, but I think he brought a point. In the end, for crypto to be successful is that the cost need to go down, the skill need to scale up, and if that is the case, and eventually you can get to a point that it is a solid footing, right? So I think that, and I think for those of y'all to look at crypto or blockchain as one of the factor, I think it could be, but I think it really depends on how it goes through, right? And as a journey, I think a lot of time is be open for all these things. Technology will come and change. and transform. So in the end, it's whether you see how it fit into there and what it works, right? If you think of Square, their cash app, which is leveraging a lot on the crypto, has become very big part of them. So I think there are platforms that have done quite well with that, right? So I think the key will be that, yeah.
So there's a question from Dr. Hari Narayanan, who's the VC. He says success is his own worst enemy, and so what keeps you on your toes?
Yeah, Dr. Harry. Yeah, so I think that I think one is that we are nowhere near success. I think that I think I will put that Karamjit Singh the other day after the Pinelapse Acquisition of Faith is it success? I mean, I think different people have a different thought. I think I still remember Karamjit told us that we disappointed him. I think in the end, there's no saying of whether this is great or not good. I think we tried our best. We got Faith to 45 million US dollar worth 180 million ringgit in a span of 6 years. So is it great? So it's okay, it's decent, but is it best? Maybe not, right? So I think, but we try our best and we build on. So I think a lot of it is what's the mission, what's the vision that you're going to build upon, and how far you're going through. And I think always learning, and I think a lot of time is learning from people who are better than us. I think there have always been different people who are better than us, many different shapes. I think it's continuously learning and also unlearning, right? What gets us to this point will not get us to the next point. Let's say example now as we are going to go to India market. Probably the success is actually quite low. But we have a chance now to take something that's built in Malaysia, going to launch in India. I mean, I spoke to some of the Malaysian entrepreneurs that have built product to go India and fail. And I think sometimes they're also sharing with me and say, yeah, what are the things that they tried and doesn't work yet? And we don't know whether we'll succeed. But I think we're continuously learning. I've been reading different books about how people in different parts of India behave, think, mindset, culture. Because a lot of that will matter as we go through to bring things from here to go there. But I think a lot of times, Tony Fernandez will say, I think dream big, right? And go there to dream. And I think a lot of it is even Tony tried in India. We have seen different Malaysian startups try there. And I don't think not many Malaysian startups have really succeeded in India. We don't know whether it will be, but it's a chance of lifetime for us to try. And I think eventually, worst case is at least a bunch of us have got a chance to try it.
And you're part of a Indian organization as well, where you can ride on them and succeed in, better chance of being successful because you already have a lot of partners in Pinelapse anyway.
Yeah, so I think that they knew India market in that sense, but they knew it from the merchant market. So we will both need to learn out the consumer markets.
Consumer markets, yeah. So we'll make sure that this is the last question, is it? Throughout your career, what are the suggestion tips you can give, especially for the fresh graduates?
Yeah. So I think for fresh grad, I think for students and fresh graduate, I think that the world is your oyster. I think there's huge potential out there. I think really think big, and I think that don't build on something, and I think don't look for shortcut. I think that you want to build upon, go through it, and I think enjoy the journey, not the destination. Right? So I think enjoy the journey and enjoy the ups and downs. Throughout your journey, career, whichever path you're going to take, there will be ups and there will be downs. And a lot of times when the days where you think things are the worst, things will get better. And when the days that you think you are sky high, you are on top of the world, be ready. Likelihood things are going to go down one day. Right? And I think it's a lot of going through that. And I think it's constantly seeing far and then yet acting on the ground and then be able to be big picture enough and yet that down and then be creative yet analytical and all those things, right? And I think a lot of it is you need orbits, and I think a lot of it is at different parts, continue to learn, unlearn, relearn. And I think maybe in how I think Cheryl Go, CMO of Grab, I think she like to say is that every 6 months she feels like she's like applying for a new job again in Grab, because I think over when she joined Grab, it was a very small organization and continuously has been completely transformed, right? Let's say the same thing as C, Garena, Shopee. So I think it's continuous transform, and I think a lot of it is during this journey you would continuously go through. I invest in a lot of startups as well, so I see a lot of founders building through. Some has a couple years of lull time and eventually they emerge well. Some has a lot of hoo-hoo-ha-ha, but then eventually couldn't go through. So I think there will be those bit. And I think whether you go to entrepreneurship career or if you go take a job and work as an employee, I think the entrepreneurship mindset will still get you far. I think one mindset that maybe you want to put in place is an owner's mindset. Whatever you do, whether you're an employee, whether you're a part-timer, whether you're an intern, whether you're a real owner, act as if today you are the owner. Think like one, act like one. And when I say think like one, it's like at least when you make a decision, when you do something, think if you are the owner, what will you do? Right? Should you spend this money? Spend the company's money, whether in future, whether your own startup or when you're an employee, as if it's your own money. Right? When I say as your own money, how you be careful about it, how do you think about it? And I think go on that. And I think I will end with Steve Jobs, stay hungry, stay foolish.
You're not ending yet, Chen Chao. There's another 14 minutes or slightly less. So that was the last question, but I want to just have this dialogue with you. I listening to you for the last one slightly more than 1 hour. What really comes across, which I resonate with, is that there's a lot of humility in what you're saying. That you start with, I don't know, this is something I didn't know. And then immediately with that comes learning, that you are a quick learner, you're a rapid learner, which is something students, people who are watching should come to terms with. And the other important thing that you said was failure and ego, putting aside the ego, because a lot of the time you're going to fail anyway, and startups fail all the time. And even if you don't fail in a big way, your startup is an experiment, and the experiment fails, then you're testing the next hypothesis and the next hypothesis. So what I'm trying to get at is our education system is very predictive. It wants you to predict the future, whereas the way the entrepreneur thinks, he or she is creating the future as they are building, right? So which is an experiment. So this is the kind of a mindset that, and which means failure is equals to learning, right? And this is something that is teachable as well as learnable, but the mindset shift is the most difficult thing, right? And how do you think that you develop this kind of a mindset? Is it something that you learn as a trial and error, or were you instinctively aware of this kind of a agile or fluid mindset?
Yeah, to be honest, when I went and joined Yeoh in 2011, I was not, right. I was this boring. Actually, today is still boring, but I think back then was a lot more. Don't dare to take risks. I'm generally because I came from consulting background, then in a smaller company building it detail, right. So I think that for me, I think that each part of it is take different bits into that, and I think that for startup doesn't mean that it's take reckless risks. I think a lot of it's calculated risk, and it's at a different bit. And I think a lot of time, especially when you want to find the co-founders, maybe if one person is super idealistic and super thinking very far and visionary building, and then you want to pair with someone who pull you back. I think Joel and me, we debate all the time, right? I think that for me, I'm a lot of times thinking of why things would fail. And a lot of times he would think of why things will work. And I think a lot of times through a lot of those debates with the teams, and a lot of times depend on a different combination of that, we all think on different angles. And I think that pull through, right? And I think that the one key part as a build on this is that as long as we have a lot of trust, we'll be able to pair up and cover through different bits. And all of us will have different things that we will be comfortable to take risks, different bit that we are very strong at, and there will be different bit that we are not good at. And so I think of it is that as you build on it is that and I think along the journey we will learn different bit, and sometimes want to unlearn is not easy as well, right? So I think when a company is small, few people, you are good when you are doing it, and then as you became like a mid-sized 50 people kind of thing, you are good when you be able to do it quite a bit, and then rarely the next group of people to do with you. When a team with few hundred people or few thousand people, you can't really do that anymore. I think in the end, it's how do you be like a conductor, set the field, be the referee, set the game, maybe even be the game designer to design how the playbook need to be played, right? And in the end, it's how do you make it work across, right? So I think that's the bit that you want to eventually building upon as well. So I think that that mindset, I think, is continuous learning. I think don't worry about you are not good at something at the point. I think constantly read widely. I think if you look at it, a lot of the great people around the world, they read widely. I think Dash, you see so much books behind him, right? So I think, and I think pick the right thing.
It's a background. It's not real, it's a background.
But
no, it's real. It's real.
Yeah, but I think it's really read widely, whether books, if you're not a book person, articles, if not podcast, video, but continuously learning, picking up curiosity, analytical, and each time you read something, you ask yourself, what can it apply? What can I do better? What can it be connected to? Right? So I think it's just do that. So each time, let's say you think of a startup that have done well, or even a failure, what can I learn from there? And not just, oh yeah, and then go gossip around, right? So I think it's picking up those things. And so each time, a lot of times as a user, you use an app. Let's say think of Clubhouse. What can you pick up from Clubhouse? Or you use YouTube. What are the things that you think works in YouTube that can be used in your next venture? So I think with the mindset, you're continuously thinking about it, continuously connect that dot, right? And then which are the things that is within your control? Which are the things that are within your influence? And which are the things that you can't do anything and you leave it out, right? Because you just can't control it, right? Let's say today, can we as a person fully control how many COVID cases in Malaysia? Likelihood, no. We can influence maybe a bit, very small part, but all of us collectively we can, right? But I think how do we be able to then plan with that, right? So I think that's the sort of some of the things to think about.
CC, like Clayton Christensen says, to build the innovator's DNA. Clayton Christensen, the Harvard professor, for those listening, he said some of the skills you've got to develop is to observe, to question, to experiment, and then networking, the 4 skills plus connecting the dots. So it looks like talking to you, the innovator's DNA is come alive. I think these are things that have been found, have been crystallized by all these people, and I think the students can learn a lot by reading, and also and these are some of the exposure they will have at APU as well. The syllabus is being changed to include the real life examples of how entrepreneurs actually think. So before we end, I just want to summarize some of the great things that you have said about failure, and use failure as learning. Speed is key, failing fast, failing cheap, and what you can afford to lose. Risk is not taking reckless risk, but calculated risk. Keeping the ego in check, testing, trial and error, being adaptive, and then in terms of competition, playing the game with the big players, but doing things differently, doing things what they can't do, and at the same time forming partnerships. And so these are really great lessons, and scaling fast, and when you invest, what is the ratio of what you can invest and how fast you can recoup it back. And I would like to urge the students who are listening to keep these as what shall I say, reflection points where you can put it down as your reflection. Any last anyone else going to ask Prof, or anyone going to ask one last question? Or if not, we can close by asking Chen Chao to summarize some of his thoughts, and how would you advise students who are doing their degrees and who are going to join APU as well, who are already in APU, to become entrepreneurial, to think differently? Any advice for them, CC?
Yeah. So I think thanks a lot, Dash, for this. Yeah. So I think that great that I think you all get this chance to be involved in APU, and I think with Dash being there, I think with very strong buy-in from APU leadership, professors, leaderships, managements, and I think faculties and everything. I think is connect a lot of the dots to make it happen, right? And I think that make use of this chance. I think for the students, I think that constantly leveraging on it. There are lots of resources. I think that within all the people that you connect, I think keep in touch. I think don't be like me that never kept in touch back then. I think that looking back then there were so many. I still remember like even Baitu founder.
Yeah, no, you could have kept in touch with Elon Musk and brought him to Malaysia.
Yeah, never knew. Right? Even Baitu, when I remember, I didn't talk to him, but he was at a talk where no one talked to, and at that time no one knew about Baitu as well. This was close to 20 years ago as well. So I think there were a lot of these kind of things as you go along, and I think with Dash now bringing in speakers every 2 weeks for y'all, I think it's continual leveraging, connecting, and I think with among y'all as well is I think each of these sessions, right? I think it's ask yourself, what have you picked up? What have you make you reflect? And what you disagree, not just agree, disagree. Maybe certain things that I shared, doesn't make sense to you. Read up more about it, find different notion, think about it. And I think it's constantly disruptive, think about it and say, what can you do differently? What can you add value to it? What can you tweak? And then continue building. And I think the more important is as you get through that is go on and take the actions. Do something to it, right? Because the entrepreneurship, they just pure talk and pure not going to do anything will not get you anywhere. In the end, the success for entrepreneurship is not how much fundraise. Fundraising is a responsibility, not a trophy. Not about winning how many awards or competitions. Those are not going to bring a real success. In the end, I think it's making a real impact. And I think that maybe I'll also end with like, let's say, whatever that you do, bring the real value, make it easier, cheaper, better, faster for your target audience. Right? None of us want it more expensive. None of us want it slower. None of us want it worse. Whatever solution that you bring in, how do you make it easier, cheaper, better, faster for your target audience? And with that, I think we wish you all the best. I think scale for the sky. And think beyond APU campus, think beyond Malaysia size, think beyond regional, and go out there and make a difference. You can do it.
Thank you very much, CC. That was really, really an insightful sharing. Thank you very much again for spending this 1.5 hours with us and sharing so freely your thoughts. We hope we can invite you again to APU to talk to the students when the COVID is not there, where you will see a whole auditorium full of eager students, with a glint in the eye, they wanting to learn. You will have non-stop questions. Thanks again. And I would like to also take the opportunity to thank the team who have worked very hard, the design team, who has worked very hard, the events team, all of them who have worked hard to put together this whole event, Professor Vinesh, Mr. Chong, Adeline, Haslina, Dr. Janita, Anis, everyone else, if I've not mentioned, I'm sorry that, all of you who have worked very hard to put this program together. At the end of the show, there will be a QR code for those of you who would like to have an instant certificate of attendance. You can register now so that you will get your immediate certificate emailed to you as soon as the session is over or by tomorrow. Otherwise, I think we are finished completely on time. Thank you again, Chen Chao. Say hello to Joel for me. I want to always ask, how does he keep so young?
Yeah.
With all his work, he's still looking so young, and so that's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks a lot. Yeah, all the best.
Thank you very much, CC. And we normally have a small token of appreciation. We'll send that to you. And see you soon in APU.
Yeah,
thank you.
Looking forward to be there. APU one day.
Thanks a million. Cheers. Bye-bye.